Hey guys, this is your host Nitin Binhani and a very warm welcome to my startup podcast channel Jazair Audio, where we share real stories with real learnings. So under Jazair Audio, this is the Startup Guru sub-series in which the relative podcast will carry the 1 to 2 minutes of sheer wisdom, practical tips or advice which has been extracted from the book or LinkedIn post of various gurus from the global startup ecosystem.
Failure does not matter, success matters. Vinod Khosla, the founder of Sun Microsystems and Khosla Ventures, during his talk at Stanford Graduate School of Business in May 15, really emphasized two key skills for all founders, that is perseverance and conviction. Here are some excerpts of that interview.
Vinod, thank you for being here today. Welcome back to the GSB.
It's always fun to be here, and it's a lot nicer than when I was here.
As Dean Salona mentioned, you were the founder and the first CEO at Sun Microsystems. About a year after you had started, you found out that Sun Microsystems was going to be shut out from a key sale. When you heard this, you got on a flight, got to the customer's lobby, and made phone calls refusing to leave until you met with the team. Where does this perseverance and conviction come from?
Well, I have a philosophy in life. Whatever I believe, I should make happen. It's that simple. And if a customer is making a mistake, the customer isn't always right, trust me. And if you want to do great products, don't listen to your customers, by the way. That story is in fact true. There was a signed contract with a competitor. I stayed in the lobby all day at 6 o'clock in the evening, and I'd taken a red eye out, and I parked in the lobby. I met with the CEO of the company, mostly because he wanted me to go away. By 9 o'clock, I'd convinced him to meet me in Chicago with his team the next day because he didn't want to be seen negotiating with us. The following morning, the day after, at 5 a.m., we signed our handwritten contract because I wouldn't let him leave. This was the CEO of a big East Coast company, Computer Vision. So we signed a handwritten contract and life was good. The point is, if you actually believe something, you try your best to make it happen. It doesn't always happen, but it happens most of the time. Most of the business school entry story is also true, but things do work out if you persist. Not always, but I like to say failure does not matter. It's success that matters. And nobody remembers what you failed at. So everybody remembers Sun. Does anybody know a company that McNeely and I started together? Before Sun, there was a company called Data Dump we started and got funded 3 months before Sun. Didn't work out. We started both roughly together. But my point is, people don't remember your failures. And I like to say my willingness to fail is what gives me the ability to succeed. I find most people are so afraid of failing, they don't try and do the things that would be important enough to do. Anything worth doing is hard.
And you've spoken in the past about the importance of failure, or the lack of it. You started your first company at age 20 in Delhi, which did not work out as expected.
Well, I didn't actually get started. They told me it'd be 7 years to get a phone line. I sort of picked up and went to Carnegie Mellon.
How was that like, the move to the US?
Look, it was easy. I wanted to be in Silicon Valley. I knew I'd get here. I had no way to pay for it, so I had to figure out how to get somebody to pay for it. In the end, the biomedical engineering department at CMU agreed to pay for it, so I went there. And I was very interested in biomedical engineering. So I did that and then applied immediately to Stanford. And you've heard the rest of the story. They turned me down a couple of times. But, the funny thing is with enough persistence, most things that seem impossible become possible. I'm always amazed at how often you can turn things around and people take no for an answer too easily. It's whether you're trying to achieve a goal like get into business school or my green card was the same way. I left the job that had sponsored me, but I still got my green card even though no lawyer would take me. I became my own lawyer. Got my green card without working for while I was at business school. And I did it perfectly legally. My strategy there was if I couldn't convince immigration, I'd confuse them, and I did. And they gave me my green card.
Well, Vinod, I just want to ask you, what are some of the perhaps the early influences that made you this way, this high perseverance, high conviction person?
Well, I was sort of always this way. I didn't grow up in this environment. Nobody around. My dad was in the Indian Army since he was 16. So he joined the ranks of the Indian Army. And when he was 16, got shipped off to Egypt to fight for the British. And so I grew up in a very different environment. But I always had this view that if I determined something was right, I was going to make it happen. And this comes to, since one of the focuses of this lecture is leadership, I am amazed at how few people have a belief system. What do they actually believe in? It's okay to offend you guys. 90% of you will do what's expected of you as opposed to what you want to do. And I even, when I come to an event like this, say, why am I here? Why would I even bother to take an hour of my valuable time? No, it's true. I have to have a purpose. My goal is very simple. If I can convert one of you, there's probably 400, 500 people here. If I can convert one of you to follow your belief and have the guts to follow your belief, I'll think of the hour as well spent. Right? So I always say, what am I trying to do and why? I don't speak because somebody, will write nice things about it. I always sort of have a purpose, but I have a belief system. And most people, even successful companies, and I have big beef with Fortune 500 CEOs I can talk about, there's very little leadership there. Don't have an internal compass of what they believe in. It's what do others expect? When I graduated, I went into entrepreneurship. Nobody went into entrepreneurship out of the business school, and people said, why wouldn't you work for Goldman or McKinsey? And I said, why would you? I couldn't fathom why you would want to do that job. I still can't, by the way. For those of you going to those places, and I'm sure there's plenty, I'm probably not the right person to talk to you. I frankly don't even care to talk to you. All of you others. I think there's something wrong with anybody who fundamentally wants to go work for one of the consultants or the investment banks today in this part. They don't understand how the world is going to work in the future. But my point again is, have a belief system, follow that compass. And I'm overstating it a bit, so there may be some hope for those of you going there. But it's only a little bit of an exaggeration. Let me go back to this issue of Fortune 500 CEOs. I've talked to many over the years. If a New York Times writer writes an article, they want to change their strategy, they want to respond. How silly is that some English major who's never had a business job can determine the strategy of a Fortune 500 company? Why? Because they care about what's written, not what their belief system is. Do you know what Elon Musk would say to that writer? Go get a real job. Right? What Jeff Bezos would say? That's leadership, having a belief system, knowing what's driving you to do what you do, not you fitting in to do career enhancement or making it look good to somebody else, whether it's to your friends or to your boss or to shareholders. And frankly, you look at all the companies that are languishing in the valley, the older companies, they generally don't have a belief system. They're generally trying to meet some quarterly target without saying, here's how we will be different, and here's how we'll do it. Apple did languish for 10, 15 years, and then Steve Jobs came in with a point of view and created the most valuable company in the world. He did irrational things. If you go back to January of 2007, January 1, everybody was saying nobody wants a phone without a keyboard. Nobody wants a phone that costs $699. I can go on with the litany. Those were all English majors writing articles. I have this beef against English majors. Not all English majors are bad, but the majority of them at Stanford are undirected and don't have a goal or a purpose. Sorry. And that's not to say among them there isn't 20% that are really good. They just didn't get the right guidance and ended up in the wrong place. I like purposeful education. Anyway, sorry, back to you.
But I want to ask you about this. You are known for being, for the lack of a better word, somewhat blunt. Well, your website says, we prefer brutal honesty to hypocritical politeness. What are the trade-offs in doing this?
Well, there's lots of trade-offs, but I'm again very clear. It started off earlier in my life. I was very successful. Even before I started Sun, I started a company like Daisy that made me more money, which was only $1 million back then, or a little more than that, than my dad had made in his career cumulatively. So I was in a whole different place. And I said, the one thing I'll do is not do what others want me to do, or be polite, which generally means dishonest. There's a great book by Sam Harris, who's a professor over on the other side, about lying. I recommend everybody read Sam Harris's book on lying and why we all lie too much and too often. We put this sort of slogan, I prefer brutal honesty to hypocritical politeness, on our website because it's a real disservice to people. You don't have to be offensive to be honest. When I don't like somebody, I can get offensive to, but generally, you can be constructive and very honest. And I prefer that brutal honesty because it serves a purpose. The receiver can do something about it if it's a constructive criticism. If you get hypocritical politeness, you might lose a lot. So again, it's about having enough confidence to say the other person will eventually appreciate it. And that slogan came after I was working on a company with another major venture firm, and I didn't believe their plan would work. They had $45, $50 million in the bank account, so everybody was comfortable, too comfortable in my view. I talked to the founders why it wouldn't work, what my concerns were. The other VCs agreed with me in the board meeting, said all these polite things. So 40 engineers wasted 3 or 4 years of their life because nobody was willing to tell them the honest truth about what they really thought. Right? And I swore I would never let anybody waste their life, at least give them the best advice I had to give and tell them I may be wrong, but I'm not going to say something I don't believe in. I just won't. And that's extremely valuable to the other thing. But to be honest, look, there are situations it offends people, and I offend people often, but it helps them if they're really introspective, right? I just had a candidate from Harvard Business School come in and interview for a job, and half an hour into the meeting, I said, you're not a match for us. Here's what I would do. And I spent the next half hour, I literally said to her, if I'm going to waste the next half hour of my life talking to you, I'm going to give you my best advice on what to do about your career, which I did. She didn't love it. She sent me a nice note a week later. But it's very valuable. But the real fact, the honest truth about why I like that is once I was in a position I didn't need a job, nobody could fire me. I've actually never worked for anybody, so it's actually sort of nice. I felt it was an indulgence or a luxury I could enjoy. Some people, if they get that financial freedom, might buy a yacht. I bought myself the freedom of brutal honesty, and it's an indulgence. I get to do things others may not be in a position to do. There is a downside for others, but I think generally constructive honesty and constructive criticism than hypocritical politeness will serve other people well. That founder, by the way, in that company called me 4 years later after this company got sold for $3 million, 4 years later. Sad story. And he called me a year after that, said, I only want to work with you on my next venture because I wish somebody had told me.
Are you a founder of an early-stage startup and looking to raise funding? Get your startup investor ready before even you start pitching to your prospective investors. For know-how, please visit www.jazaro.in. That is www.jasaro.in.